Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yisrael Hawkins. Well, we had a rush to cut oil supply. Russia and Saudi Arabia kind of playing tag with that. Farmers, sadly, dumping food in the midst of the coronavirus where a lot of food is greatly needed. And domestic violence is on the rise since the shelter-in-place orders have been given for the United States of America and much more. But first, we're going to start off with Russia and Saudi Arabia are working to come to a deal to cut oil supply production by approximately 10 million barrels per day. RT's Ben Swain said regarding the deal on RT recently, in principle, Russia would cut about 1 million barrels per day and the Saudis 9 million barrels per day. What's not clear is what other countries would do to help stem the tide of excess oil flooding the market, since Russia and Saudi Arabia are not the only oil-producing countries. Putin wants the U.S., who is the #1 producer of energy in the world, to cut their production oil as well.
Well, he continued, currently Trump has not agreed to any cuts in shale production in the U.S., but is brokering the deal between the two countries. Now, Russia is saying, if we cut, you have to cut as well, while Trump is threatening tariffs on oil imports if they don't comply. Now, the Saudis typically go along with the U.S., so the blame in this situation will fall on the Russians introducing shale into the mix, and the Saudis say this isn't about shale, it's about oil. But Russia says this is about energy. Now, many say that the two countries are close to a deal, but we'll just have to wait and see when one actually gets done.
That's right. Well, oil demands have decreased amidst already low crude oil prices due to the coronavirus. Currently, as we mentioned, OPEC nations are looking to Russia to cut oil prices, as Saudi Arabia is having a hard time coping with oil prices around $30 to $40 per barrel. Well, Russia, on the other hand, sees the push from the OPEC nations and the U.S.'s unwillingness to cut its production. So Russia, not wanting to end on the bad end of the deal, is looking to possibly ride out this crisis on its current monetary reserves, which until this blows over, which they mentioned before that they could easily do. And Saudi Arabia, on the other hand, doesn't have that option.
Well, that's right. Saudi Arabia is over-leveraged with a $50 billion budget constraint, which causes them to have a need for $83 a barrel in order to fund its economy, get off of oil, and expand its economy under the vision of Mohammed bin Salman. Now, the current set of events aren't a coincidence, as the ruble was growing stronger as of last year, as Russia works towards de-dollarizing in order to move away from the dollar platform and be able to fight against American sanctions thrown its way, and to be able to rival, if not topple, that 47-year-old petrodollar standard, which is basically the monopoly with regard to the oil and gas standards.
Right, and we brought out in times past regarding Russia being involved with the BRIC system, which is a collection of countries that are working to basically get out from underneath that petrodollar as well. So we see Russia definitely making moves in this regard. Well, Camille Waynes, a professor of economic affairs, spoke to RT's Crosstalk regarding the Saudis' move in this conflict, saying that the Saudis are doing the same thing that they did back in 2014 when they put themselves in a big deficit, and they're doing the same thing right now. Well, there's no economic victory by entering into a confrontation with Russia, because it will backfire and they will have to go to the open market and borrow more money and be in more debt. Saudi Arabia's break-even number is $80 a barrel to balance their budget, but oil is currently at $30 a barrel or lower.
Well, he continued, they're going to be in deep trouble with the war in Yemen, and now economically with Russia, and they're going to be in a deep situation, especially since Aramco is traded on the public exchange, which had tumbled lately. Now, he concluded that the Saudis should have coordinated with the Russians and worked with them, and that would have been more helpful at this point.
Well, we're going to turn it over to our field correspondent Larry McGee in regards to more effects not only from the oil market, but something even more of a precious commodity to people, and that's food. A lot of farmers have not been able to harvest the thousands of bushels of crops that they have sitting in their fields, as well as milk is being dumped. And we're going to see a little bit more regarding this update of information from our correspondent Larry McGee. What do you have for us?
The ripple effect of the consequences associated with the coronavirus has laid bare the fragility of the systems on which many people have come to complacently rely. The infrastructure for food distribution within the U.S. is a strong case in point. While store shelves across the country remain empty, farmers who are set up to cater principally to the food service industry are leaving thousands of boxes and millions of pounds of produce to rot in the fields. The affliction has revealed and produced realizations which are as unbelievable as they are disturbing. The videos of large-scale product dumping going viral amid severe food shortages has many people questioning the system. It appears that U.S. growers are not structured to serve the supermarkets which sell directly to the public, and many are wrapped up in agreements to provide products specifically to the food service industry and have oriented their businesses accordingly. Stated bluntly, while Americans slept, food distribution within their country became tightly controlled and profit-driven, and the woeful emergence of the coronavirus has made that fact evident. The system, as it is arranged now, is structured to waste if it can't profit, and no longer has the necessary infrastructure, such as robust train and truck operations, to mobilize and provide the kinds of community-level assistance needed to aid the citizens who are now languishing underneath the explosion of the crisis and its aftershocks. Experts say that the government is unavoidably aware of this fact, but is more concerned with maintaining a veneer of control and re-election than it is in sincerely addressing the problems which are now being called the worst crisis since the 30s. Ironically, at the same time, critical care in hospitals is coming under greater scrutiny after sobering reports of high death and mortality rates. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Well, it's another example there of a country experiencing the very high death rates from COVID-19. It seems like every country gets to that point to where they have a very high spike in deaths.
Yes.
Well, the food shortage and food dumping are just part of the economic crisis that the United States and the world are facing right now. The United States unemployment rate has now climbed to nearly 17 million people. And Robert Scott, the Director of Trade and Manufacturing Policy Research at the Policy Institute, said in an interview with Al Jazeera that, quote, "This jump in unemployment is unprecedented in the United States since at least the Second World War. Nothing like this in the last 75 years.
Wow. Well, Scott says because this was an intentional shutdown of the American economy, unlike the recession we saw a decade ago, the estimates indicate 20 to 30 million or more could lose their jobs before we reach summer. That's an unprecedented 15 to 20% of Americans out of work, which there has never been a time like this for people to recall in this country. And we're talking about, at least 75 years, but, seeing this type of thing has got a lot of people on edge.
Well, but America is not the only country that will be affected by these economic hard times. Scott said the U.S. is the biggest buyer in the world. We import more goods than anyone else in the global economy. Our imports are going to collapse. That's going to reduce demand in the rest of the world. So trade is going to collapse all over.
Kind of like a ripple effect economically. And that halt in the demand for imports to the U.S. is going to cause a quick decline in output of products for the rest of the world, Mr. Scott explained. Speaking of the U.S., we've been able to respond with a massive $2 trillion relief package. And we're already talking about the next $1 trillion relief package that can keep income flowing in the U.S. There are many countries around the world that do not have the luxury of engaging in that kind of deficit spending. They don't have the capacity to borrow at those levels.
Well, this is already enough trouble for the world's economy, but add to that the fact that financial markets are freezing up around the world because they just don't have access to capital like the U.S. does. the economic outlook is pretty serious everywhere right now. It's amazing that the virus, just the virus here having such a wide impact on everything, the economy, the markets. It's even with the number of dead, it is affecting so much more.
Yeah, and a lot of people have a feeling of hopelessness as they see their jobs and everything else kind of tumble out of control.
Well, and they see things that they've never seen before, never experienced.
Yes, that's correct. Well, we thought the coronavirus was a big enough problem to deal with, but for many Americans, stay home, stay safe order that was released by many governors still does not keep them safe from their own family members who abuse them. The fear that domestic violence rates will rise as people follow the stay-at-home orders is a true threat.
There is no community that is immune to domestic violence. People of any ethnicity and economic status are susceptible. Now, according to some statistics, domestic violence impacts 1 in every 4 homes in some way. And now when people are being asked to stay inside their homes for an unknown length of time, due to the COVID-19 outbreak here in America, the number of violent acts is likely to rise because victims are isolated with their abusers. So even though they were adhering to the stay home part, they were not adhering to the stay safe, as many people are suffering that abuse.
Yes, that's sad. Well, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo is facing one of the hardest challenges of his career. At a briefing, Governor Cuomo said, "Don't underestimate this virus. I think that's the mistake we made from day one. We as the collective we as the global community. This virus is very, very good at what it does. We lost more lives yesterday than we have to date. We understand, and all the experts have said," Dr. Fauci said, "from day one to me, you will see the deaths increasing after the hospitalizations because the deaths increase the longer a person is in the hospital, the longer a person is on a ventilator."
Well, Governor Cuomo went on to explain how they will be bringing in additional funeral directors to deal with the high number of deaths that New York has been experiencing. Now, on April 8th, 799 lives were lost due to the COVID-19 outbreak, the highest single-day death toll New York has experienced. Cuomo stated, "If you ever told me as a governor that I would have to take these actions, I couldn't have even contemplated where we are right now."
Right. He also compared this pandemic to the 9/11 tragedy by saying 9/11 was supposed to be the darkest day in New York for a generation. We lost 2,753 lives on 9/11. We've lost over 7,000 lives to this crisis, actually 7,067 at that time. He said that is so shocking and so painful and breathtaking, I don't even have words for it.
Wow. Well, the governor continued his comparison, saying 9/11 was so devastating, so tragic, and then in many ways, we lose so many more New Yorkers to this silent killer. There was no explosion, but it was a silent explosion that just ripples through society while the same randomness, the same evil that we saw on 9/11.
Well, lastly, the President of the United States says there's enough PPE for all American hospitals amidst the crisis, and he's putting the blame on the medical personnel themselves. But what's really going on is the question. Take a look at this next video, and you decide for yourselves.
Where are the masks going? Are they going out the back door?
I have been wearing this surgical mask for 2 days.
I'm on the 3rd day of using my N95.
They've been delivering for years 10 to 20,000 masks, okay,
How do we go from 10,000 masks?
to 300,000.
I'll tell you how as a healthcare worker. Because we have a pandemic.
The richest country in the Western world in 2020.
The strongest economy in the world.
This is actual real life in the hospital now. They give you a paper bag.
Paper bag where I store a face shield and an N95 mask.
And I have to bring it to and from work every day. Do you think that that sounds safe?
Clean it between patients, use it until it breaks. Unacceptable.
Especially because I am 16 weeks pregnant.
We're delivering millions and millions of different products, and all we do is hear that, can you get some more?
To say that we are not using our masks correctly or that we're hoarding them,
I don't think it's hoarding. I think it's maybe worse than hoarding.
that's completely preposterous.
What we're seeing hospital workers do is actually going out and finding protective equipment in whatever possible way we can.
When you are intubating a patient, particles from the patient are released into the air, and it becomes increasingly dangerous for anybody that's in the immediate vicinity.
Without this PPE, we won't need the ventilators because none of us will be around to run them.
We're at risk. The patients are at risk. Our families who we're going home to, they're at risk. The grocery store clerks that I go buy my groceries from, they're at risk.
We need proper PPE and we need supplies of it today. Not next week, not in 2 weeks, not in a month. We need it now.
President Trump, at some point you're going to face the end of your own life. Think about how you should be treating the people who are going to be taking care of you.
We shouldn't be losing talented healthcare workers because of a lack of protective equipment when people are just showing up trying to do their job. It's wrong. We should all be ashamed that it's happening. We should all be ashamed that it's happening. We should all be ashamed that it's happening. We should all be ashamed that it's happening.
Well, and of course, the nurse gave the answer. Where is it all going? It's going to the pandemic, meaning they have to continue to change their gloves and their mask as they go from patient to patient. So they are running out, despite President Trump saying that they've sent, thousands of these, the PPE equipment to the hospitals. But what also to note there in that video is how the morale of the doctors and nurses that have to continually deal with these patients is starting to suffer. That's taking a toll on them as well.
Oh, yes.
They don't want to get sick. They don't want to see their colleagues sick, much less anyone that they know die. But that's exactly what's taking place.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting. Prior to this is, what Cuomo was calling this a silent silent killer, because, when it comes to, even though people couldn't see it, but there were, things that occurred as a result of 9/11 with the buildings, the fires, the collapsing, and you think of other natural disasters, a lot of those things you kind of have a precursor that something bad could occur. There's nothing for this, and so a lot of people are succumbing to this, where they thought, they just kind of went on without a care in the world before, finding themselves on ventilators, and even a lot of young people dying as a result of it. And everyone's just scratching their head because there is no cure for this particular virus.
Right. Well, the only cure there is for the virus is the 5 months that Yishua Hawkins has been talking about. If you'd like to find more about this and other stories, you can contact the House of Yahweh. When you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and monthly newsletter. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. You can visit them on any of their websites by going to Yahweh.com, YisraelHawkins.com, or Yahweh'sBranch.com. You can also visit our website by going to YPNnews.com. You can email the House of Yahweh at info@yahweh.com. And for all calls outside the United States, please dial the number on your screen. And again, as usual, don't forget to check out the free online program to aid you in studying and understanding the Holy Scriptures. That's the Yisrael Says and Ask Yisrael program. And you can find those by going to YisraelSays.com and AskYisrael.com.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next, Yishua Hawkins continuing to explain the Bible prophecies that are centered around this time period known as the last days. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.